Hi, welcome to our 13th Ward conversation with the new chief and Inspector Katie Blackwell. We're working really hard to orient and to invite the chief to all the different parts of our city, right? Let's help get him up to speed quickly. Normally we do this with, some kind of homey potluck dinner, everybody would bring something, but that would put more pressure on you all to leave a busy work day or a busy life and try and do that. So instead we chose to go with pizza from Lake Harriet Pizza. I've spent hardly any of my ward budget all year long, so I splurged on you all. I really did. So we have the benefit of having Lake Harriet Pizza tonight. I wanted to thank Southwest High School. Welcome, Chief. Wanted to thank Principal Bennett, Dr. Bennett, Southwest Community Ed and Emma Campbell specifically for helping to host us this evening. Also, I could not do this without the help from my staff in the City Hall office each day, who many of you know. One of those people is Ruth Olson in the red sweater back there. Her husband Scott is also assisting, and John Frood, my other policy aide over there. And that's important for you to see. John in the gray sweater and Ruth in the red sweater, because they're the ones that will be helping to bring mics around to all of you to help give questions or comments about tonight. So obviously also to the chief for agreeing to this. Welcome, Chief O'Hara. And Katie Blackwell is no stranger to us. She runs our 5th precinct. She has also with her today our day watch Lieutenant Ryan Johnson and Lieutenant Lieutenant McCree, who I only just met a few minutes ago, admittedly. So this evening we'll have about an hour of questions or just comments, right, and answers. A conversation is best as we can structure it with you all. So John and Ruth, I think you have microphones, yes? Getting microphones? Yes, John had one in his back pocket there. And they will come to you. They'll meet you where you're at. You don't have to come and stand in an awkward line or anything. They'll meet you where you're at. And please just ask one question at a time so we can get to as many people. If you have more, many of you do, I know. We'll come back if there's time at the end. And just to also say, some of you do have comments, not really questions. Don't feel like you have to phrase your comment in a question. If you just need to say what you need to say, and that's important. And everybody here in this room, I'm going to ask to respect everybody's need to say what they need to say, and we can have that and impart those that advice or those comments or that experience here as the chief gets quickly oriented around the city. We're going to save space for the last 15 minutes, so about 7:45, for just one-on-one conversations with the chief, for people who maybe didn't want to speak publicly, but do have something that they want to visit with him about. So we need to honor the end time of 8 p.m., please, for the janitorial staff that help make this possible and help make everybody that's putting this together be able to get home to their loved ones. So with that, I'm pleased to welcome Chief Brian O'Hara to our part of the city. I was not part of his search committee, but I was lucky enough to be able to step in at the end. I actually had an opportunity to interview all 3 finalists at the end because the council president, who was on the search committee, had an emergency that day, and so I got to step in with Councilmember Vita. Another really important member on the police search committee was Sarah Jones, a member of our community. She's the executive director of the Innocence Project. She's the person that just raised her hand back there. Thank you for being part of that. That was a lot of work. I was really impressed with Chief O'Hara, even at my first meeting with him. And he quickly became my first choice, not that anybody really asked me what I thought, but here are some of the things that I just want to say I think he really brought to the table. I think it was really obvious from the beginning of our conversation that he has a proven ability to lead a department that's accountable to the community and has a shown ability to reduce crime. That kind of a track record is impressive. Some of the parallels, his hometown experience to Minneapolis, very public, officer-involved killings, civil unrest, and having to really rebuild community trust from the ground up. Those are important aspects. I think that he has consent decree experience that makes him uniquely qualified. I don't get to promise these things, but I do think that's where we are headed as a city, is likely into a consent decree. The ability to empathize with residents who've been through traumatic experiences and understand their grief and their trauma. This mic seems to be coming on. And also his absolute focus on addressing gun violence. These are the things that I thought were really raised Brian O'Hara up to the top of the list in my perspective, and I am pleased that he was then selected as the mayor's nominee, and then he was approved through the council process. So that was one of the full unanimous votes of our city council this year, and I think that's really special. So now, the reason that we are all here tonight is to hear from Chief O'Hara himself. So I'm just going to hand the mic over to you for maybe about up to 10 minutes even, and then we'll pass it to the community.
Thank you, Council Vice President. I actually forgot about that meeting. I mean, it feels like it was, months and months ago after everything that's happened in between. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, for taking time to be here. It's a great honor to have this opportunity. Some of you all I've got a chance to already get to know and speak with, and others obviously it's the first time. Since I have been the chief, I've been very active in the city. It has not ended, with the confirmation process. I've been going around trying to get to different houses of worship each weekend around the city to get to meet members from the community where they are, and also being present at other community meetings around the city. As the Council Vice President mentioned, I do take the issue of crime and violence very seriously, very personally. So I'm not the type of police chief that's going to be hiding in an office in City Hall. If you haven't, some of you have, you will see me on crime scenes, you will see me in the community when emergencies are happening, and I will personally be there to ensure that we're doing everything that we can with real urgency to address the challenges that we're facing. At the same time, I've been around with the police officers in the various precincts. I've been riding with police officers at night. I've been observing roll calls myself, just trying to get a better sense of how the police department itself actually operates, and to identify kind of where the gaps are and the things that we need to change, so ensure that we have a culture that is both accountable and also takes the challenges around harm in the community very seriously. So those are all things that are not going to change overnight, but that is something that I'm committed to day and night, 7 days a week. To church yesterday up in New Salem on the north side, while I was sitting there towards the end, I got a text message that a woman was shot a couple blocks over. So I made my way directly there, and then got to help the officers on scene, and also wound up speaking with another resident that had been affected by the stolen car problem and actually lost a family member, a child, last year. So I think just being present in community like that is important. I want to be able to connect with as many people as I possibly can, and I want people to be able to see me. So that's why I'm here. I don't want to talk too much. I want to turn it all over to you all so that you all get a chance to ask me anything and everything that you want to. So thank you. Thank you again for coming.
Inspector Blackwell, did you just want to say a couple words? Inspector Blackwell was added to this meeting a couple hours ago, so if you might just, because not everybody in the room knows you, though they should. So could you just say a couple words?
So because this is a police department, I can just do things like this. And so she is here, but she is here because she is excellent. I'm so thankful that we have her, and I'm sure many of you know she's doing an amazing job.
I hope this works for me. All right, everybody, I see a lot of friendly faces in the crowd tonight, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy Chief O'Hara is here. He's only been here for like four weeks, not even. I feel like I'm getting pulled over here. See, they're already pulling me everywhere already.
What's your first impression?
But since Chief O'Hara's been here, it's only been 4 weeks. He's been extremely engaged in the community, within the police department. He's holding us accountable right from the get-go. He's asking the right questions, and I'm really excited what he's going to do here, because I've already seen the few things that he has done, and I'm really excited to work with him. So I hope you give him the opportunity and to let him show how he's shining already. And really appreciate that you came here. We needed a strong leader right now to move forward and build back our community relations with all of you, and he's the right guy for the job. So, thank you.
All right, so with that, we want to turn this over to community. I'd ask that when, you know, if you want to just signal to John or Ruth, actually Ruth's back there managing the pizza, signal to John, and he'll come over to you. If when you get the microphone, if you could introduce yourself then, if you're willing, if you could give us your name, the neighborhood you live in, or any other pertinent information that might be useful, then go ahead with your piece. It'll help us all kind of understand where people are coming from, even within our community. I see a hand right here.
Hi, I'm Julie Wickland. This is my neighborhood, my ward. I've met Chief O'Hara many places around the city, but I'd like to welcome you to my neighborhood and thank Lene for having this meeting. We are lucky in Ward 13 to have a strong leader like Lene supporting us and supporting the things that we need here and working hard on the city council. And I want to welcome you to this community where this is where I had my home invasion. I was held up at gunpoint here, my daughter and I, 1 year ago, really, on a Sunday afternoon. Obviously a lot of things have changed in my life since then. The main thing being becoming a lot more aware of what's going on in our criminal justice system in Hennepin County and in Minneapolis, and also aware of a lot of the challenges that you are facing. And again, why I'm so glad that you are here, and so thankful for Inspector Blackwell and so many of the people who are still here on the force. And I think one of the main things that I want to know from you, and I want you to be able to reach out to us, is how can we help you add to your force? I have been participating on the Unity Community Mediation Group as a guest, as well as the TCRC, and I think that there are things that potentially the City Council and the Mayor's Office could be helping with as you identify those things that are problematic with too much red tape in terms of getting new recruits, as well as other processes that are hindering that. I heard that Gators had mentioned that there are no exit interviews that are done when police leave the force. And that information is lost as to, obviously, we know why some people leave with PTSD claims and things like that, but to have that information seems like something that should have been going on for a long time already. And I know a lot of these things are out of your hands, and so to be able to get that to Councilmember Palmisano, to get that to the mayor, and get that to people who want to help and support that cause is just really something that I want to emphasize, that we are here and we want to support the work that you're doing and adding to the force. And just again, wanted to say thank you.
So you mentioned a few things there. So I think there's changes that need to be made on the state level for a number of these issues. I think in terms of recruiting, Unity Community Mediation Team is excellent, and we need as many people as we can to get involved with those recruitment efforts, because those efforts are going to target specifically Minneapolis residents. On the state level, like politically, this is a different discussion. Some things need to change. I think it's too difficult to become a police officer in the state. It is unlike where I'm from, and it's unlike many other major cities in the country. And to me, it's clear that it's having a disparate impact on who gets to become a cop. So I'm shocked that those conversations had not happened before. But if somebody doesn't bring it up, I'm going to bring it up. Because that needs to change. If we're actually serious about changing culture and including more people from the city, then everybody from the city needs to have a fair shot at becoming a cop in Minneapolis. I think there's other things too, like if we're talking about accountability, for example, I am learning that a lot of people left here on pensions for PTSD, particularly while misconduct investigations were pending. That hatchet needs to be sealed. And nobody's going to like it, but the state legislature needs to change the law that if you are potentially under criminal investigation and you may be fired, you can't just bail out and take a pension. Otherwise, we're never going to have accountability. That's not the way it works in other states. That's not the way it works if you're a federal law enforcement officer. So, like, things like that need to change, and that's above the council here. That's state level stuff. So I mean, it's things like that. Other things that I've learned since I've been here that just blow my mind with accountability. If a police officer gets arrested in another municipality in this state, they do not have an obligation to tell me. So if my cop gets arrested in one of these bordering towns, they don't have an obligation to tell me, and they don't have an obligation to like immediately provide me their reports. I learned that since I've been here. So those are all things that I've raised with the administration here. We actually have a meeting tomorrow night with the legislative delegation. There's a number of things like that that I will ask our legislators to change, but that'll have to be left up to the political process.
The only thing I was going to add to that is something the chief already said, which was one next step to further that conversation in a way that you all could participate would be to talk to your state legislators, the people that the chief and others and members of council will be meeting with is the Minneapolis delegation, which includes some really important leaders at the state now, right? Senate President Bobby Joe Champion, way to go, Bobby Joe. Senate caucus leader is Carrie Dietzick, also representing Northeast. Bobby Joe is more Northwest, I guess you'd say, or you would just say North side. And Jamie Long is on the legislative side, is the majority leader. These are really important people to have in the conversation. These are people who we think can maybe finally move that conversation forward at the state level. So I would encourage you all to reach out to them. They represent Minneapolis, and they will be the ones that Chief has in the audience tomorrow evening, Public Service Center.
Greetings and welcome, Chief. My name is Lou Sachs. I'm from Perth Amboy, New Jersey. Right down the road. And I really mean welcome. I was very pleased to see somebody from Newark. I know Newark very well.
You gotta, the microphone drops, it seems like every 10th word or something. You gotta keep it real close to your mouth.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Can you hear me now? Yep. No. I live about a mile from here. I've lived here for over 20 years. I have a strong background on the corporate side in human resources, labor relations. And we had an incident very close to where I live where a police officer, two junior officers on a Saturday night, both with about a year or a little less than a year, a woman had called in a complaint that she thought somebody was being raped. Police officers came down in a car. The woman was shot and killed. Can you hear me? Not working? Okay, I got to talk right into it. Yep. At any rate, that led me to take a long, hard look at the labor agreement, which is online, as you're probably aware. And I see some issues with it, and I'm sure you have too. So my question is, after all of that, do you see some parts of the labor agreement And a lot of what you said as you were going through the state level, I saw some contractual issues too. Do you see issues there that you'd like to work on? And I'll shut this.
Well, I believe there's actually, because of the action the city has taken to try and separate the labor union from supervisors to police officers, there's actually an injunction right now that basically says I'm not allowed to talk about those types of things. What I can tell you is, I think the reality is the union is a relevant stakeholder. So whenever we're talking about accountability, whenever we're talking about improving processes, I believe we are obligated to ensure that the union has a voice and that they have a seat at the table. And some of the things that I have learned and how things have operated here has definitely lacked communication, just from the police department officially with the union. Within the last 2 weeks, I called in 3 different police officers and had the union come in with them because I wanted to talk to them about their behavior. And when I did that, the president was calling me like crazy because everybody was shocked. Like, this never happens. You don't actually call somebody in and talk to them about what they're doing. Like, people have no idea what to think. But I think there are opportunities to get what we all want together and to try and work with the union in some ways. That being said, there's going to be stuff that we're going to disagree on, and I know what side I'm going to be, and I know they're going to have to play the role that they play because that's their role. That's why the members pay them. But I definitely think, just in general, there's ways to work with the union if we just communicate. Same way if there's people who don't agree with us in the community. If we're not talking to them, what good does that do? So I think relevant stakeholders need to be involved regardless of who they are.
Yes, Lou, not that you asked me, in general, in real broad strokes, over decades of time, the city, way before my time, traded away management rights because we couldn't give them police officers the pay increases that they wanted, that they needed. And so we traded away our management rights as, in lieu of being able to pay our police force more. And now we want those rights back. And I want those rights back. And it turns out it's very hard to get them back because it's something that has to be bargained for. So in a very broad scope, that's where we're at right now with, in particular, our police union contracts. And there are a lot of things that I don't really understand why we traded away over time, like the ability to choose hours in a way that might not be healthy for police officers, that might not give them enough rest over time. That was something that was bargained for at a time that we couldn't give them something else that they wanted. So now we have to try to figure out how do we, in my mind, right that ship and get it back. Welcome.
Thank you, Chief and Council Member and Inspector Blackwell. I'm no stranger. I'll try to be brief. Basically, just 2 really brief questions. The first thing is that we hear frequently how short-staffed the department is and how it's critical to increase staffing. So my first question is, are they still working off-duty jobs? And are they still working buyback beats? That'd be my first question. The second question is, why is it that the police department chooses not to arrest bosses for wage theft, but chooses to arrest petty shoplifters? And what does that say about who the department criminalizes and what priorities there are? Thank you.
I know you as Mr. McCann.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Neighborhood.
Yep, my name is Keith McCarran, and I'm an interloper from Ward 3, but I always take a chance to show up and speak, so thanks.
So in the short time that I've been here, to answer the second part first, in the short time that I've been here, I have definitely seen instances of things that have happened in the past where the lowest person on the totem pole takes a hit. I mean, internally. And then I look at investigations and I review and I ask questions. Well, why didn't we ask the supervisor? What about this person? They were there. And yes, that's something I am not going to sign off on a police officer being suspended for doing something. Meanwhile, there's a supervisor standing right next to them. And nobody interviewed that person. And no one is holding that person accountable. So yeah, just in general, that's not okay with me, and that will not happen. And if I get investigations like that from, you know, the IA or the board, I am sending them back, as I have already.
Are you talking about the wage theft question?
Well, I mean, in terms of, well, the way I interpreted it was, we're not holding supervisors accountable.
Oh, maybe I wasn't clear. What I'm asking is, why the police department chooses to pursue petty shoplifting. Let's say somebody shoplifts a tube of toothpaste or a can of deodorant. Why does the department prioritize going after petty shoplifters, but yet we don't see any investigation of bosses for wage theft? So not necessarily in the police department itself. I'm not saying that, you know, bosses in the police department are committing wage theft.
I misunderstood. I apologize. So I would have to look into that. I'm not aware of any complaints or any investigations being initiated for them.
Okay.
So one of the things, Mr. McCarron is mentioning something that I authored about 4 years ago, and it was the wage theft ordinance. It also applies to freelance workers. That's a second ordinance that is managed and investigated through our civil rights department. That's probably why you don't see people arrested, because it's civil rights that does those investigations and ultimately, how do I say, goes after those bosses, as you mentioned, to right that ship, right? So those become settlements between the city and an employer on behalf of those employees. So the same way that somebody can take a civil rights violation to our civil rights team and have it investigated, and there are attorneys there. That's happened in our ward, people who say they've been discriminated against for different types of rental practices, for example, is something that's happened. And we have a civil rights investigator assigned to that case. As that transacts, it becomes more like, I guess I'd say they happen more like they are invited to mediation. If they don't want to go to mediation, then it's more of a court order kind of thing. But you don't go and arrest somebody who is accused of wage theft in one of our establishments. And that's happened here in the 13th Ward, just to be clear. It would be not hard to find in civil rights documentation, which employers around here have been found guilty, so to speak, of wage theft, but the guilt is really more just a settlement that they've agreed to pay their workers in hours of sick and safe time or in dollars, that type of thing. I think that's your point, is why do you do that, or why is our focus, given a very low police force, on things like petty theft, which the chief can answer. I don't think that is a priority. And why do we allow things like our police officers to work off-duty jobs and do buyback? And I would say, I believe, because it's covered and has been litigated and has been found to be something that we need to allow by way of the police contract. But right. I'm just gonna hand it over to the chief for any other.
Yep.
So thank you, Mr. And I apologize, I didn't understand that the first time.
Yeah, sorry.
So I have issues with this. But as the council member said, there has been past litigation that ties not only my hands, but the city's hands. But to me, that's something that we have to get to eventually, because that's not an excuse. You know, I am not okay with the way the current setup here is. The way it does operate now, the commanders do have the authority to pull officers back and to put them on duty for the city if they are needed. But I just feel in general, the way it is operated is certainly not a best practice, I should say. Right. It's something I believe that all of it should be going through the city. Particularly if, you know, officers are working for a private entity and using the city's police car and the city's gas. That's something, all of that should be coordinated through the city by ordinance. But there is, because of litigation in the past and the police contract, there is stuff that ties our hands, but we're going to have to eventually get to work and try to figure out how we correct it.
Thank you.
I would also say on the off-duty topic, I'd like to bring it all in-house. That would be the way to manage it. That's my trajectory. Now that takes agreement from the union, and that's difficult to do, and it takes a lot of other steps. One thing that would help with the off-duty audit recommendations is the ability to accurately track all hours worked, right? Which would take a different kind of system for us to be able to use, and it's an expensive system. So there's that. Go ahead.
I mean, it is rife for corruption without it going through the city. You know, I'm from New Jersey. If you Google this stuff in New Jersey, dozens and dozens of police officers in cities in New Jersey have been arrested by the FBI over stuff like this. Jersey City, the sitting police chief was one of them that was arrested because he was taking kickbacks from off-duty work. So, yeah, clearly, it's very clear this isn't a good practice that we need to get away from.
I'm encouraged to hear that.
I like to think Minneapolis is not a big corruption city, just for the record. Next question. I think I see Dylan with the microphone. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chief O'Hara and Councilmember Palmisano for putting this on tonight. My name is Dylan McMahon. I'm a neighbor here in the Fulton neighborhood. I was actually hoping you could give a more detailed answer to your response that you gave to Julie's question. You mentioned barriers to entry in becoming a police officer. Wondering if you could give some examples of those barriers to entry, both good and bad, and in an ideal world, what you would like to see different.
Sure, thank you. So, from what I have learned, you know, even when, for example, there's like multiple requirements here. So not only is it just having college, you have to have college, then you have to have, if you don't have the right type of college education, you have to go back and get certain skills training before then you can even go into the police academy. I think the reality is there are other experiences people can have in life that make them perhaps even better suited to be a police officer in the city. If they live in the city, if they've, you know, worked other types of jobs for a number of years, where it's very clear that they know people who live here, they know how to speak with community, they're able to get information from folks to build solid relationships. To me, that's a little bit better than just sitting in college for 2 years. And I think it's clear just from things that have happened elsewhere in the country, where the DOJ has come in and looked at, and it's not my understanding this has happened here, but it has happened elsewhere, where they look at requirements for becoming police officers or for getting promoted. And they look at the process. And if the process is such that it's producing a disparate impact based on race or some other factor, they have to look at, is this actually something that is a bona fide occupational qualification? And if the answer is it's not, that there's other things people can do, then we need to be open to that. For example, the skills training. If we're able to simply provide whatever training the state wants to mandate, my opinion is we should be able to do that. We should be able to help our residents, if they want to become police officers, bring them in, whatever skills are necessary, you know, before the police, we should be able to provide that for them, as opposed to them having to go, you know, and wait for college and pay tuition and all that sort of thing. So I mean, to me, there's structural things that are like that, and also there's I mean, the list just goes on and on. I could think of things like, for example, like, let's say someone from the city has worked as a corrections officer in a jail for a number of years, 4 or 5 years. If they're successful in that, they're able to talk to people who are in jail or in prison, you know, while they're unarmed and develop relationships with people, that's the type of person I want on the street here. And that's an experience that's different from just going to community college for 2 years. And I think we need to be open to having officers come in that way. And I think it will also, again, I think it will also help getting folks from the city to be able to do this.
I could add on to what the chief says here. You know, another member of our community, Brittany Sensor, some of you know her. Brittany Sensor is one of my contacts at Hennepin County Technical College, and she assists the training academy work that's done at Hennepin County Technical College through some of the Pathways programs. And a really important way that she's looking at things are what are the barriers to get people through these programs, and she's finding that it's really a lot more like her area of expertise, which is more in the social work end, which is that people who are adults that are trying to provide for families, they're not able to fully take off 2 years and just be part of a police training program. And what she's trying to do and to help them out with are maybe how does she help them satisfy their needs so that they can get through the program, but also there's a lot more options, right? It's not be a cop or not. It's be a cop, or maybe what you really want to do as a career is to work on our behavioral health crisis teams. Or, by the way, 911 operators, we are desperate for 911 operators in our city and all over, but especially here in our city. There are so many ways that if you want to be in public service and have a way to show up and help people in crisis, that there are a growing number of ways to do that. And it is to help people sort that out if one path to become a licensed peace officer isn't necessarily for you. And that's a good thing, I think.
Hi, my name is Dennis Sewell. I live in the Armitage neighborhood. I guess I have three comments or requests or wishes. But first of all, I would like to see the police department not be seen as an arm of one political party. I'd like police officers to put their politics aside when they do their job. Second of all, I grew up in a town of 500 in northern Minnesota, and especially after George Floyd, I think you heard a lot of unsympathetic comments from outstate Minnesota legislators, particularly about Minneapolis and its police department. And up there, you know, the police officers, everyone's kids go to school together, they go to church together, police officers are on the school board. I don't want to get into residency requirements, but I'm hoping that somehow on a level for Minneapolis, a city this size, that the police department can somehow integrate with the community so that they're not seen as, pardon the term, like an invading force. And third, I think one perspective that we never hear from is just the officer on the street. And with all due respect to the police department people who are here, I would just like to hear from someone who is just out there. What do you see when you're out there? My wife is an ER nurse at Hennepin County, and if she was giving a talk about healthcare, what you would hear from her is much different than what you would hear from the head of the ER or the head of Hennepin Healthcare. So, you know, if police officers can just, without repercussions, with permission, to just say, you know, it doesn't matter what you say. You're not going to cross me as the chief. You're not going to cross the union. We just want honesty. So those are my three things. Thanks.
Yep. So, starting in reverse, with the third thing, I agree with you exactly. That's why I go to the precincts myself. That's why I show up at scenes. That's why I ride in the car with them. No disrespect to the command staff, but I don't want to hear from the command staff. I want to actually see and hear this myself. And there is nothing wrong with you talking to any of our officers. There's stipulation and restrictions with officers talking to media, and there's good reason for that. But there is no restrictions on police officers interacting, and in the future we can do that. We can have officers who actually work in the neighborhood present, so I think that's a good idea. The first point was about politics. There is no place for politics in public safety, period. I obviously, I was appointed by the mayor and confirmed by members of the council, but I am the police chief for everyone, whether folks like the police or whether they hate us, whether they protest against us or whether they support us. And I expect everyone in this organization to behave the same way. So yeah, I will certainly, if I am aware of them, and I have some sense of some cultural things here that we need to change that may touch on some things like that. But if there is anything overt that happens like that, the officers will be held accountable. And the second thing, I'm drawing a blank, I'm sorry. Yes, integrating with engagement, right, or no? So we were talking tonight, why I believe it's important for folks from Minneapolis to be able to become police officers, and I think that gets to your point exactly. There's hundreds of vacancies right now in the police departments, 300 some odd officers smaller than it was 2.5 years ago. That's a tremendous opportunity if we can get in the right people. And I think for the most part, the people who are most affected by crime and violence in this city, and the people who are also most affected by policing, don't necessarily care about having a closeness with a police officer in like a geographic sense. They don't care if I live on their block in North Minneapolis. They just care that I care about them, that there's a closeness and sense of feeling and their issues. So while I know the most important thing that we need is good policing, I do believe that one of the best ways to get there is to try and have more people on the police force that have a connection to the city. So whether that means they live here now, whether that means they're from here, but they don't live here anymore, whatever. I have definitely seen and I understand a sense that people have that people come from the outside to come police on the city and then they just leave. And that's certainly a perception I think that we need to change.
Hi, I'm Ray Farr from the Fulton neighborhood. I'm the one whose little kid has been running around somewhere around here. You'll hear now and then.
There's a few, don't worry.
Well, thank you for the event tonight. My question is around accountability. I know accountability is important to you, and it's important to me too. I really feel like it's a foundation of trust building and especially rebuilding. And I was wondering what you feel like the role is of sharing data and data transparency within that accountability. Thank you.
So obviously, accountability is absolutely essential under, living in a constitutional democracy, right? The people who work for the government need to be accountable to the people, and they need to be accountable to the law as interpreted by the court, right? So accountability is a huge issue, but I think we often think about it in terms of only around the police misconduct kind of stuff and complaint stuff. There also needs to be accountability in terms of dealing with crime and the operations and the things that go on here, and in particular dealing with gun violence in this city. Yes, we have shortages. Yes, there's too many guns in circulation. There are too many people shot in this city. But not one of those instances can be normalized. And there needs to be accountability around those types of operations and things as well. I think the last part of what you said.
Around data.
The data, thank you. So yeah, the laws here are different. And for as much as people describe them to me as being open and transparent, I also see restrictions and times where I cannot release information that I would otherwise. So that again is something that, again, on my list of stuff to bring up to the legislature. Because yeah, I mean, I do believe that matters of public importance, even body camera video, if it has potentially no impact on a pending investigation. It couldn't, potentially taint a witness's statement because they haven't given it yet. I mean, things like that are important. And for as much openness as there is here, there's also stuff that's strange to me that's restricted. So it's not where I would like it to be.
I would add to that I think one of our very important legislative priorities should be improving our data practices law at the state. Here's one example of it. There are many people, multiple people at least in this room that were sending messages to the city council after the death of Amir Locke saying, why can't you release the body camera footage? Because, in part because the state legislative delegation was also signing on to a letter saying you should release the body camera footage, and the facts of the matter were that because of state data practices law, that was what was holding us up from being able to release the body camera footage. So, I mean, I think that even state legislators are confused on this matter. Our city clerk, Casey Carl, speaks with a lot of emotion about how this is one of the most confusing. It changes every legislative session, so how you even then become compliant with the legislative new data practices laws of last session, in time for the next session. It would be best if they were stable, if they didn't change, and I have personally gone, bye Charlie, that's my son leaving right now. I've personally gone to the legislative committees to say more local control of what kind of data we can put out, because that's a trust builder with communities or not. So that's a really important point, and thank you for bringing it up. Not sure where the next.
Hi Chief, thank you so much for being here. So glad that you are here. And thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. I just wanted to read a comment. I read this excellent paper by a woman who, Adrienne Baker from Mitchell Hamlin School of Law. And I think it's a good segue regarding state law and how it really does impede. I think it impedes your specific job as well. So I'm just going to read it, if you can bear with me. It's about arbitration, and it's part of her paper says, arbitration is responsible for reinstating many fired officers, while many police chiefs do the right thing in police disciplinary cases. Their decisions are often symbolic. Police disciplinary appeals have forced communities to rehire police officers deemed unfit for duty by their supervisors. In short, binding arbitration gives too much authority to arbitrators to reinstate ineffectual officers. Despite the role that police officers, city council members, and mayors play in local politics, it is arbitrators who generally have final authority when it comes to police disciplinary actions. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. Thank you so much.
It's the truth. Those are facts. It can be frustrating at times, but to the extent that we are able to do so, we need to ensure that we are not giving an arbitrator an excuse to overturn our decision. So what's frustrating to me about discipline in this city, and I think it's no surprise to anyone here, is that the process just oftentimes just takes too long. Too drawn out. Folks in the community have no faith in it. People in the police department have no faith in it. And in the end, no one is satisfied. I think to the extent that we can, I think just in general, and I think this is true with punishment in general, when we think about criminal sentencing, don't necessarily need to have the most severe penalties for everything. But there needs to be a consequence to behavior. And the consequence has to happen close in time to the behavior. Otherwise, this whole process is useless. We're not changing anything. That's my frustration with it. And so to the extent that, now I am, by statute, I am responsible for imposing discipline. And largely what happens before that, a lot of that is out of my control. So while I know sometimes, which I've already done, it's harmful when I send stuff back. It's harmful because now the process is going to take even longer. I have a responsibility of ensuring that when I sign off on discipline, that the investigation was complete, that it was thorough, that we're not giving an arbitrator or a judge or someone else, an excuse to overturn something, which then makes the whole thing even worse. So, to the extent that we can control it, we need to ensure that we have complete and thorough investigations. But I think what's most important is that we arrive in a space where discipline is close in time to when, bad behavior occurs.
If you just want to remember to give your name and neighborhood, that'll be great.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jones. Good to see you. I'm from the Lyndhurst neighborhood, and I wanted to raise an issue that we hear a lot about in the newspaper, and people complain about the disciplinary process of coaching. And if you two could explain how that works, why we have used it, and how we might be able to find a better balance in the use of it so that disciplinary records can be public, that I think it would help us all.
So I'm going to ask the inspector just to give the historical context and definition of what coaching is, and then I'm going to tell you what I think about it and what we could potentially change.
So coaching is a chance for, if an officer messes up, and it's generally they mess up, not out of malice, but they just messed up a policy. They might have been acting in good faith and messed up a policy, right? So when things go off to internal affairs, they decide whether or not it's going to go to the Office of Police Conduct Review or internal affairs. And then does it meet a violation or not? Did the officer, they explore several different things in the officer's background. If the officer has never messed up in that category before, it generally comes back as a coaching. And we're talking about lower level things typically. And that's for me, the police inspector or a supervisor to sit that officer down and give them a coaching saying, this is the policy where you made this violation. What are you gonna do to fix yourself or correct it for the next time? So we're giving that officer an opportunity to correct it before the next time.
So, thank you, Inspector. So I think my responsibility is, one, to ensure that only in appropriate circumstances does something go to coaching. But what I would prefer is that there be some other alternative, which currently doesn't exist. The option is now, low-level violation goes to coaching. Anything else goes through this whole long, drawn-out process, which brings us back to the same situation we were in before. And to me, it's just a matter of volume, right? There's only so many people that work in internal affairs. There's only so many people that work in OPCR. So if the volume of complaints, and particularly most complaints are low-level offenses, if we're just jamming that all into a system that's already overworked and there is no other alternative, I see an issue with that. I think coaching should only be used, as the inspector described, in very limited, low-level circumstances. However, I do think we could imagine other options from that. I could imagine a situation that actually existed here, probably 10, 15 years ago, and exists in many other departments, where we could send an officer to appear before their commanding officer. So if someone has a low-level violation in the 5th precinct, they report to Inspector Blackwell. If we determine that this is low-level, it doesn't necessarily need to go through all of the things that every other case goes to, maybe we could create something where they could appear before the inspector, the inspector verbally reprimands the person, it then gets tracked as discipline, could come to me and I could sign off on it. So if there was something like that, there would be some kind of alternative. But it just seems like the system here is so cumbersome and there's just no incentive to resolve cases quickly. It just keeps piling stuff on top and handles everything the same way. So I'm hopeful that eventually we could imagine some options to sort of take a little bit of the weight off and actually try and encourage the union to be involved and help resolve things earlier, plea out to things, and have things actually still be tracked as discipline.
I think I can say this. I just want to share that one way that we felt that we could look at coaching differently and maybe give a little bit more transparency to that is to have, how would you say, extra different types of variations, because one of the things that we've found, and it might just be anecdotally, is that a lot of things that would be considered coaching, there are things like how an officer has written a report, right? That there's a better way to do that, that there's a learning curve. And wow, if you were to take all of the coaching as a result of writing reports better out of this mix, you would see a huge number of those shift over to this new category, right, that might be on report writing. And that would both give extra transparency to the public and also help to explain how many of those there really are. So maybe another way to address it, to try to give increased public trust, would be to have more categories like that.
Hello. Really glad to see you coming here, Chief. It looks like you're going to do a great job for us, and I'm really pleased to see you. Some years ago, I was a volunteer at Community Dispute Review, and we used to do police civilian review board cases. So if somebody filed a complaint, we'd sit down then with the cop and the person and try to at least talk it through and some understanding. So I did a few of those cases, but my personal response was the cops were jerks. They were arrogant pricks.
What
I
year
believe
was
it.
this?
I don't recall, it's been several years ago.
And your name and?
Greg Backlund from Vineyard. And so, you know, when I think about cops, there's probably various different personalities, and people really want to protect and serve, and others who are tough guys who want a badge so they can go out and kick some butt. So what's the psychological profile that you're looking for when you hire and that you hold people to?
That is an excellent idea. I mean, it's something that did exist in the past, but that's another example of something potentially we could do if, you know, both the officer and the union agree, have some sort of mediation to resolve the situation. I think that's but then, if the officers act the way you said, then they could, not only your conduct there will be held accountable, and the original issue. That's the only way something like that would work. Talking about psychological profile. So a lot of this has to do with ensuring that we have officers who exemplify the values that we expect, the values that community expects officers to have. All of the members here, everyone in the state goes through like a psychological examination where a psychologist has to determine that they are fit and safe. And questions like this do come up as a part of that exam. But I think it's a little bit more deep than that. We want to be able to know that a person has behaved in the past in ways that we expect officers to behave here today. And that goes beyond like a person's past employment and whether or not they've been in trouble in the past. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the way policing works today is, this isn't like years ago, you know, you hear about things like stop and frisk and all this other stuff in New York City and other places around the country. That's not what policing is about today. Policing is about collaboration. Like, you need people that are willing to collaborate with folks in the community as well as other law enforcement agencies. But you need police officers that are able to speak to people, to develop relationships. Like, If I'm working in your neighborhood, I need to know who your kids are, I need to know if they're friends with his kids over here, those types of things, because we need police that have relationships in order to kind of know what's going on, people to be willing to tell us what's going on, where we need to be, what we need to be aware of, because I think that has real power. And again, I hate to keep going back to it, but that's why I do believe it is important to have people who have a connection to the city to become police officers.
If you ask me what's the psychological profile of officers that I want to recruit and retain and promote and all of those things, I would say I want officers that can show up from call to call to call with all of their creative problem-solving skills at hand. And having and helping our officers maintain that kind of compassion from call to call to call, and to show up to serve, not in a one-up, one-down kind of way or being a hero per se, but really showing up to serve. That's what I try to foster in investments in how we keep a workforce healthy, and particularly first responder workforces who show up to people's worst day. I know that in my own office, you know, we don't get calls on people's worst day. That's a 911 call, please. But some of the best moments that we get to celebrate between John and Ruth and I are when we literally are using informal authority and being able to take a creative way to solve something for a customer, a constituent, or one of you, when you've heard no's or something has gone very wrong through the city processes. And those are wins. And I think that some of the kind of neatest moments in policing that I've been able to celebrate over the past few years with Inspector Blackwell has been just kind of novel approaches or novel ideas to real clusters that have happened. And those, they aren't few, but those are the things that I want in somebody's psychological profile.
Hi, my name is Chaz, and I'm in Ward 4. The question I have is how do we collaborate with the community? As we've been sitting here, there's been situations that people don't even, I see you looking at your phone, and there's been a crime spree in the last 2 hours over in this district right here that they just found a stolen carjacked car over north. And my question is, as being a Northside resident, I see what's going on. You know, I do work for an organization called Black Lives Streets, and a lot of it is juveniles. But yes, those juveniles are being released. Now, as somebody who grew up in North Minneapolis from the 80s and the 90s, I don't see enough being done with our juveniles. They're just being, even like the incident at McDonald's on 45th or 43rd, whatever it is, where I know for a fact one of those kids was released. I heard that on the scanner, that one of those kids was released. That is a big issue for me of seeing that, because even yesterday we dealt with something that we never even talked about with a stolen Kia. Hyundai, my bad, that was recovered on 12th and DuPont in the fire hydrant. It's juveniles, but what are we doing? Because there's not being enough done. And my question is with so much of it that is coming back to be 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, a lot of that is single parents that they can't watch what their children are doing, and when they are getting on their children, then you have places like CPS getting involved, or you have the kid run away because of the fact their parents are being too tough. Where do we, as a community and as law enforcement and as elected officials, where do we come together? Because it's getting out of hand. It literally is getting out of hand, where everybody is suffering at this point.
Thank you. It is totally and completely out of hand. When I went over yesterday around Girard, because there was a lady shot there, another mom came up to me, and her child died last year. After she picked him up from work, brought him back home, he left out the house, and in less than an hour, was in an accident as a passenger in a stolen car, and he died. Late last night, a 14-year-old child driving one of these stolen Kias, stolen Hondas, that had a one-car accident, is on life support now and will likely die. He has since passed. A 12-year-old today, 12 years old, was in a stolen car and was shot. But that's the second time he's been shot in the last 3 weeks.
Is that the one with the cast?
Yes.
Oh, wow, I'm done.
It's outrageous. Yesterday morning, before this accident, police went, there were 4 kids in a stolen Kia, boxed the car in, took the kids out, brought them downtown. The problem is what happens. I'm not here to say that we got to lock all these kids up, but you can't just let them go back to the same situation with no support, with nobody monitoring, with no help, and expect a different result. That's the problem. That's the problem. And it is literally a matter of life and death. How many times are we going to allow this kid to be out in the street, in the last 3 weeks, 12 years old, running from the sheriff's office, getting shot 2 different times? I mean, we need more than just the police here. That this person may die, this child may die soon, unless there's some intervention here. And it's frustrating for me because it is not just law enforcement. Like, this whole, and especially around the stolen car thing, like, we need help. We need help. Like, this is preventable. I never thought I would see, like, the 80s again and early 90s with Meet in the Club. But everybody who has a Kia and a Honda, they need to put a club on. Because, it's that easy to steal. These kids have these TikTok videos that show them how to do it. And it's almost like a competition on social media where they put these videos out there. And they're kids. They don't understand, the consequences of this. They don't understand, but 12 years old. Exactly, but there needs to be something though. And I'm not saying it needs to be, lock them up and throw away the key. But as society, as a community, we need everyone involved in this because it is an emergency and it is outrageous. And the numbers are staggering. They're absolutely staggering. And it is definitely not something that the police can control on our own. So we need folks who own Kias and Hondas to get the club. If people can't afford it, we have some in the police department. We need other folks to get involved and help get them out to people. We need the corporations to be held responsible for this and have them change the design on this so this can't happen because they're making plenty of money off of this. Meanwhile, we have kids dying over this. So, I mean, it's a lot and it is outrageous where we are, but we need everybody to be involved in solutions to that.
Thank you. I guess I would add, this is where the county and the social services of the county really can enter the conversation. We need things that help address some of the root causes of this behavior, and some of that is drug treatment and other kinds of supports. There's a lot of wraparound things we need. Something that I've had the privilege of being part of this past year has been MN Heals 2.0, and that is, about 20 years later, this new way of getting all of the different interjurisdictional partners in a way that's coordinated, right? Instead of just pointing the finger at one another, to really say, no, how do we work in a more coordinated way to try and help address these kinds of issues? And one of them is juvenile criminals, and it's not about just arresting them and throwing away the key. It's about how do we step in a way that is caring and helps give them the things that are missing in their lives in a way that can help provide that arc or that turning point. And how do we do that across cities? Because kids don't just stay in the same city that they're living in at the time, right? Like they're crossing boundaries and different municipalities are picking them up or they're being truant from school in all of these different ways. So it needs to be.
Do a time check and say that we have 3 people that I've identified for speakers left, and I want to make sure that we honor all of them. So
I'll stop talking and just let the chief answer.
Hi, I'm Jan Umstead. I live in Armitage. Going to Councilmember Palmisano's point, as far as I can tell, a fair amount of law enforcement, the right hand and the left hand, don't know what each other is doing, both internal to the department and across jurisdictions, and within things like the external, violence interrupter thing. How do you make that system work, both for the officers and for the community, so that everyone can be on the same page?
Thank you. Well, I believe in violence interruption work. That's something that I helped worked on my previous life, and it's something that I've actually gone around and spoken to other cities about how to do. Here, the whole idea with establishing an Office of Community Safety, integrate all of that stuff internally and to build supports for it. What I've seen just from talking, and we talked about it at MSTAT this past week, I know I need to teach a lot of the folks who work here what appropriate roles there are and what expectations we should have for violence interrupters. Like, so for example, there were 15 adults who've been shot more than once this year in this city. Those are people that we need to be communicating on the top of the list with violence interrupters before they get shot again and killed. And I think a lot of times, just in general, with law enforcement, there's this idea that violence interrupters work for us, which they don't. Violence interrupters should be giving us intel or information, which is not their role. Violence interrupters are here to simply try and keep people alive. So we need to support them and provide them, with information that we have where they could potentially prevent a future act of violence happening. And to the extent that there should be accountability over that work, that accountability piece means, maybe communicating back to us or to the Office of Community Safety, hey, out of 15 people, we were able to reach 5, and 3 of them said they'll go to services, but they're having this problem. So helping them figure out how do they get more people to services. But they're not an arm of law enforcement. That's why they're effective, because they're not the police. So I do believe in trying to help advance and build that work further, because again, we need to be doing everything we possibly can to address these problems.
Welcome. Thank you for being here, Chief O'Hara. My name is Barb Nickel. I'm from the Linden Hills neighborhood, and I'm a lifelong Minneapolis resident. So I want to thank you and your family for coming here and for taking this thankless and very difficult job. You mentioned that you're in this 24/7, and I just want to say we need a healthy police chief, so maybe dial that back a little bit so you can hang on to you. But I just want to make a comment on the need to communicate with the state. As you're probably well aware, Minneapolis has been under quite a microscope, especially for the last few years in terms of its public safety reputation. And I think you have a wonderful opportunity right now, a honeymoon period and a bully pulpit. And please use that, because if you can actually be public in what you're asking for, it could be a win-win for, and I don't mean to demonize outstate versus urban, but it is a lot of finger pointing at us from other places. If you can come up with win-wins that work for everyone, we'll all be better. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Minneapolis. I'm so excited to see your here and really excited about the idea. Penny Searson. I grew up in the Longfellow neighborhood, family in the Lyndhurst neighborhood. Lifelong Minneapolis resident. Apologize. First of all, one of the things you had shared was about the culture really felt that being part of the community was an essential piece. And that's something I felt very strongly about having grown up here. I grew up where the police officers lived in our neighborhood. We didn't have club sports everywhere. We went to our parks and the police officers were there, would hang out. They knew us by name, we knew them by name. Our first jobs, they were there, things like that. We don't have that here. I'm not quite sure how you fix that, how you incentivize police officers. You can't make them. People have to want to live here. It's a great place. I like to remind people of that, and you'll see that soon enough. But I've been part of a local sports program too, and one of the things, we had some police officers that actually did pro bono work by coaching. I can tell you, it was the most amazing experience. Kids, as well as the police officers. I mean, yeah, they could take a side job and make a ton of cash. However, on the other hand, the impact that they had on those kids was immeasurable. And I think that's something that hopefully some people in your department can share those ideas, and maybe you can incentivize people to do like that. It's just such a small piece. One other thing, accountability. How do you think we can measure accountability as we move forward? Knowing that's really going to be hard. I mean, this is tough times. I'm not trying to sugarcoat this. It's challenging, but we have a lot of pride here. We'd love to do anything we can to help all of our officers, not just in this area, everywhere. And actually, my nephew, just sorry, I'm from a family of
Minneapolis?
police officers. No, he's in his community. He lives and works in his community. So, I mean, we try, but he's in a good place. So, but that's all I have. Thank you.
So thank you. Couldn't agree with you more. And, one of the terrible effects of short staffing and having a reduced force is that police departments shrink and everything kind of goes towards 911 and essential things. And some of the first things that get cut are the most important. Stuff around community engagement, particularly community engagement amongst youth. And the irony is this is the time when you need that the most, more than ever. Particularly if we do want to start targeting perceptions in community amongst young people to have their perception change, that they can see themselves as being part of the change that they want in the community. So I'm thankful though, because we have a fantastic officer, Crystal Scott. She used to work downtown. In her previous life, she was an elementary education teacher. She's into physical fitness, knows all that kind of stuff. She has started re-implementing the Police Activities League program here. And I think she's doing a fantastic job. And it's just in the initial few weeks, but it's our hope, it's our plan to build that out further. So can be back to what it once was here in the city, which is a great program which provides a lot of avenues to do that. I recognize personally how important that is, and to find other ways to engage with in the city. I have a meeting with a couple of coaches on Wednesday afternoon. The coaches who coach basketball, men's basketball at over north, to talk to them about ways we can engage, get police officers, individual officers involved in activities with young people. So I believe it's something that, I believe in it. I will be personally involved in it, and I do want to try and encourage as many as our officers as possible to try and do that work as well.
And for our final speaker.
I might offer that Jeff Peterson right here in this, not front row, nobody is brave enough to sit in the front row but you, sir. In the second row, Jeff Peterson has been an active part of the Police Athletic League, and you might, if you want to plug into it, talk to him afterwards. John, you said last question. All right.
Hi, my name is Britta. I live in the 5th precinct, North Minneapolis. I actually grew up in Linden Hills, and I've noticed that response times in Linden Hills is much faster than in North Minneapolis. And I also think it's really important that the city council works really closely with the police department in order to get things done. And I really appreciate the fact that you're here hosting this, Linnea. One of the things I'm wondering is, how is the city council working with the police department right now? Because I think that's how we're going to get stuff done. I know there are city council members that are not working with the police department as effectively. And I'm also wondering where we're at in terms of hiring police, and also are there officers that are stationed in areas where there's higher crime, more officers in areas of higher crime?
So I'm going to let the police answer the police kinds of questions. That really surprises me because, as I understand it, in part just geographically having to go around bodies of water and such, we have one of the worst response times in the city. So I don't know if you know any differently, Inspector. I would say, this unanimous vote of support for Chief Brian O'Hara is a step in the right direction. I work really hard in my council vice president role in trying to get consensus on things. And I don't know how many people individually reach out and, demand of your time, or I know a little bit more about the people who demand your time, Inspector. But I think we're all trying. And I do want to give that positive message back, in that this is a city council that, much more than in the past few years, is really working hard to work with our police department.
So in regard to the council, I have been invited and I have been present in community functions, community meetings with every council member already. And many council members I know have also gone to roll calls in different precincts, sometimes multiple times throughout the city. So while that may not be the style of every single council member, everything that I've seen so far is I've been present with community, and I do believe there is support in trying to do what's best for the people of the city. In regard to, I don't have particular data offhand on averages and response times, but I do know, quite obviously there are different demands by the different precincts. So each year, the percentage of staffing is allocated based on demand. So while, for example, North Minneapolis may have 40% of gun violence calls for service, 3rd precinct may have a larger number of calls for service overall. And all of those types of things, factor into staffing allocation. And even if there physically are more officers on duty in North Minneapolis, you still may be able to get a police response here quicker, just simply because there's less things going on. And in particular, the types of things that require officers to be occupied for a longer period.
I'll just add to the lakes. Oh man, we got to get around the lakes, and it takes a little bit. And everybody wants us to do 25 miles an hour. But we're broken up in the 5th precinct. Each precinct has a different breakup of where the squads are assigned. So for instance, in the 5th precinct, we have like a 10, 20, and 30 land. So the sergeants and lieutenants, the sergeants doing the roll call thing, we're making sure we're assigning officers to each and every district. But generally what happens is, in a busier district, they might get pulled down, right? And so another cop has to cover down on the far south district. And so sometimes it does cause that delay. But we also have a 60 car, which is a floater car that floats around to try to help expedite if something big is going on down further south, whereas if our attention is further north. I hope that made sense.
So thank you. I'm going to be quick and wrap up here so people have a chance to individually visit with you or others here in the audience. I do want to point out, I didn't see him at the very beginning, but Skylar Nash is here. He's part of our Race, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Department. Thank you for being present tonight, Skylar. Ruth, how much pizza do we have left? A lot. I'm going to be please come bring some home or I'll be feeding it to my children for the next 3 weeks. But please seriously take some pizza home with you. I'll be pushing that on anybody that comes up with to me. Chief, on behalf of this community, I want to thank you for your time tonight. I want to welcome you to Minneapolis. And thank you especially for your insight and your candidness.